let's see, what have we got here? Thursday, December,
No,
no, pardon,
Tuesday.
Tuesday, December the 5th, 11:04 a.m. This is the zoning ordinance advisory committee meeting. I'm Chair Tip Housewright. We'll call the meeting to order. I think Ms. May will call roll.
All right, Chair Housewright,
Here.
Vice Chair Blair,
Here.
Mr. Barry,
Here.
Mr. Berry,
Here.
Mr. McGregor,
Here.
Mr. Reeves. There he is. And Commissioner Rubin.
I'm here.
Sorry, I'm here. I was on mute.
Great, and
All right.
that's cool.
And so I believe staff is going to read our item into the record and summarize your report. Is that correct?
Yes. No, you don't need to read.
Great. Okay.
Just start sharing.
Okay, you're taking off, okay.
Read the case number and
Yep.
all that stuff.
So my name is Michael Wade, Senior Planner with the Department of Planning and Urban Design. Today we'll be discussing, all right, there we go, DCA 190002, off-street parking and loading code amendment. All right. We will start with study background, and I think our PowerPoint is on a little bit of a delay, so we'll try to account for that today virtually. We'll start with the study background. This study has a significant amount of time behind it, and so it's going to be a little bit longer. And then we'll jump right into the proposal that staff is bringing today regarding parking and loading minimums. Parking design and locational standards including bicycle parking, transportation demand management plan, and site plan review standards. And then we'll get into some frequent questions and concerns that staff has heard. So bringing up the calendar now, very basically, this was authorized by the City Plan Commission on October 3rd, 2019. After a significant amount of interest was expressed to elected and appointed officials before that. It then saw 25 zoning ordinance advisory committee meetings. It's a very large number for context. Did quite a bit of research, reviewed current conditions, best practices, peer cities, started developing a framework, testing it around the city. Due to some structural changes, city leadership and departments, we then picked this up in August of 2023, held a couple of public listening sessions, and then reintroduced it to ZOAC. There was a city council briefing in October 2023. So just reading the City Plan Commission authorization. Consideration to be given to amending off-street parking and loading requirements, including but not limited to hotel, restaurant, multifamily, and alcoholic beverage establishment uses in transit-oriented development. So we have just a couple of slides that are going to sum up a great deal of discussion from the past, those 25, 26 ZOAC meetings. In general, we're looking at these parking minimums. And again, we're not looking at parking spaces. We're looking at the regulations, parking minimums that are considered outdated, dysfunctional, and inflexible, and are considered to create barriers to equitable development. As they exist right now, they're a broad one-size-fits-all solution, create cumbersome processes for applicants and staff that can be a barrier to redevelopment or use of existing buildings, disproportionately burden small businesses and entrepreneurs with a racial equity impact to that. They impede adopted walkability, transportation, and environmental goals, preserve a financially underperforming land use for the city, and have been shown to increase vehicle miles traveled. And we'll touch for just a moment on adopted city plans, but vehicle miles traveled, especially single occupant vehicle trips, generally do not contribute and even work against adopted city goals. In addition to parking minimums, we're also discussing some design and locational regulations. As they are on the books right now, they present significant weaknesses in providing a high quality, walkable environment that our review staff needs to continuously kind of make up for in negotiating with developers. They allow frequent pedestrian conflict points with cars entering or exiting driveways, allow parking lots to degrade pedestrian access to buildings. And again, that note there is just repeating that our staff do a great job of reviewing and working with developers. We just want to back them up with code amendments that formalize the posture of the city as relates to some of these design and locational standards. So just a quick list of many of the ZOAC meetings, and I had to make the text pretty small because there are quite a few, looking at regulations in base zoning, in planned development districts, looking at other cities, what kind of board of adjustment or other exceptions have been seen. Public input and interdepartmental input has been brought in several times, reviewed, discussed. During a lot of this, again, you can see the dates 2020, 2021. Generally speaking, we had a completely different zoning ordinance advisory committee. We had some differences on city plan commission during this time. And so as we go through the study background, we'll be summing up 4 years of information and discussion that some here weren't a part of. If you look at the date, January 21st, 2021, it says parking framework. We did begin to assemble a framework that included some pillars. Much of what staff is going to propose today maintains most of those pillars, though some of them in slightly different form. And then, of course, we had virtual listening sessions this year, 2023, and reintroduced the topic in its broader land use context in August. The city has quite a few plans that address this, whether it's our Forward Dallas Comprehensive Plan, Connect Dallas Strategic Mobility Plan, our Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan. This is touched on all over city plans. We look in these plans at multimodal transportation instead of automobile prioritized transportation systems. We look at wanting to create a desirable, safe, walkable city. One where housing is not made any less affordable than it already is, less attainable than it already is. And then the ability of businesses to start up without the additional burden of parking minimums. Outside of the city, of course, organizations like DART and North Central Texas Council of Governments are also involved in how we move ourselves around the city and how we build and the impact. Of course, land use and transportation are one and the same, and all of this is looked at together. We were asked when putting this presentation together, what has changed since 2021? There was a framework being discussed. Nothing was ever proposed at the staff level at that time. But I did just want to go over the main points of that framework. There was a lot of time spent entertaining very localized and partial reductions in parking minimums. There was a full array of design standards proposed, quite a few. There's a transportation demand management plan requirement proposed. Excuse me, not formally proposed, discussed. And then parking management districts were an excuse our audio issues. Parking management districts and parking benefit districts were an additional pillar. This is being taken up by the Department of Transportation in their on-street parking and curb management plan. And I'll bring this up a couple of times during this presentation, but actually at 1 o'clock today, the Department of Transportation is briefing the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the Council on that on-street and curb management policy plan. Excuse me, there are a lot of P's in that sentence. And so later in this presentation, I have the URL. I think you can also find it on the city's website if you want to hear what the Department of Transportation is saying about that. So one significant difference here is that these conversations really did the important work of looking at specific intersections, specific districts and areas and neighborhoods and blocks of the city, and had a conversation to no end about very targeted, some would say more surgical solutions. Transportation really is a regional issue. It's a full city land use issue. And in the end, these conversations really just supported staff in our conclusion that we want to look at reducing parking minimums to 0 citywide. And so today's proposed amendment looks at doing just that, reducing parking minimums to 0 citywide to allow context-sensitive, right-sized parking, improving parking design and walkability, as well as bicycle parking, establish a transportation demand management plan program requiring larger developments to think comprehensively about their impact on transportation systems, and then including just some structural and readability revisions on the formatting and hierarchy of code. I do want to make one point as we go through this on versioning and wording especially, or versioning especially, excuse me. In the construction of this amendment document, an earlier version was used at one point that maintained a couple of items that staff hadn't meant to recommend. And so that was sent out. We immediately sent out another version pointing out those errors and correcting them. There was still one artifact from that left in, and I'll point that out during this presentation. So jumping into the proposed amendments, we're not going to go line by line, waiting for this to show up on the screen, but we do want to point out a very important directional text change in section 51A 1.102, applicability and purpose. This is talking about the purpose of the development code. In general, the regulations in this chapter have been established in accordance with a comprehensive plan. This is talking about the development code's responsibility of putting into practice what we've adopted in our plans. For the purpose of promoting the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the city in order to, currently, A says lessen the congestion in the streets. We're proposing to change that to ensure safe and efficient circulation of all modes of transportation, prioritizing transit and active transportation modes. This, of course, includes lessening congestion, but we just want to broaden it to the full context of what our plans discuss. So let's move forward into parking and loading minimums. I think everyone on the Zoning Ordinance Advisory Committee is familiar with the general basics of parking and loading minimums in the city of Dallas. We have lists of land uses. Each one of them say required off-street parking is, and then there's usually a ratio, 1 space per something, per bedroom, per square footage. We're proposing to reduce that within each land use to 0. We're not striking out that line, and we'll discuss why in just a minute, but reducing these for every land use in 51A to 0. Similarly, for off-street loading, generally within land uses in 4.200, the next line D is required off-street loading. And then there's a table, usually by square footage. For instance, 0 to 10,000 square feet requires none, 10,000 to 50,000 square feet requires 1 total required off-street parking space. We're proposing to change that to adequate off-street space for loading must be provided at the director's discretion. And so a clue into development in the city of Dallas. Our code, of course, presents the ideal situation. Very often when developments come in, they're under unique site constraints. They have other unique issues to the site, and our staff work with them to make sure that they're providing what the city needs to not work against our transportation goals. And so currently an example of a land use that already has no loading minimums, and we're just going to talk about loading for just a moment and then go back to parking, is multifamily dwellings. In that section of the code, there's no loading minimum for multifamily buildings. But the development teams and our city staff still work together well to provide whatever loading is needed. That's location, that's spacing, etc. And so really this text is there just to sort of bolster and formalize that conversation. We're not saying none. We're not saying that no off-street loading is required, although that will probably be the case for many developments. We're just saying work with our transportation engineers to figure out the context. We'll talk about planned development districts for just a moment because the change that we're making is in Chapter 51A, and planned development districts are regulated elsewhere. However, many of these districts do point back to Chapter 51A. And so, of course, we have, I think, now over 1,100 of these unique PDs that have unique zoning requirements within them. Some of them have no modified parking minimums. Some of them encode many, and some are kind of partial, referring some land uses back to 51A and specifying parking minimums for others. Those PDs that specify their own parking minimums for land uses aren't affected by this change. But where a PD refers back to 51A, that will respond and coordinate with these changes in 51A. Also, one point, as you're reading through the text, you'll see that there remains a whole lot of text in 51A about how to calculate parking minimums, even though we've just said we're proposing to turn them to 0. That is also responding to planned development districts. And so if a planned development district specifically requires one space for a certain number of horse stalls, for instance, and I think one or more of them do, all of the language in 51A still regulates how to work out if there are shared uses on a site, if there will be reductions and exceptions. All of that is still in 51A, and we're leaving all of that in place for now to address those PDs. We do have a comprehensive code reform coming up that will look more holistically at the formatting of all of this. Right now, we're trying to keep it just within the standard of what the city of Dallas does. Let's move on to parking design and location. And of course, after this, we will have plenty of time for talking about some frequent concerns, and then hearing testimony from people who have signed up and showed up, and then discussion by ZOAC members. So when we talk about these design and location standards, we just want to note that, again, this is the ideal. This is the world of the plan, or excuse me, of the code. And administrative waivers and exceptions are proposed also to accompany these standards, so that our staff can make reasonable alternative decisions for developments when it's really necessary. Let's talk first about parking location. 51A 4.301A3. What are we proposing? Prohibiting parking between one front facade and the street. So if you have a corner lot or you have a through lot with more than one frontage, this is really just about respecting the one frontage. Moving parking to the rear of the building or to the side if the rear is deemed impractical. Proposing that parking shouldn't take up more than 60 feet or 50% of the frontage, whichever is less. We're proposing this. This is really about ensuring safe pedestrian access from the sidewalk to the building. This is the pedestrian zone, should be pleasant, should be safe. This is about encouraging buildings to be forward on the lot to create a well-framed, desirable streetscape. These are our public rooms, and we want all modes to be able to get from their respective part of the right-of-way to the building without needing to cross a vehicle drive. We're just trying to reduce those conflict points. Talk about curb cuts for a moment. 4.301A4A. Generally speaking, we're adding some language about the imperative of reducing size and amount of curb cuts when possible. This establishes the posture of the code, posture of the city toward curb cuts. We're also proposing that lots with 1 to 4 unit dwellings must limit curb cuts to 1 per lot, and they need to be a maximum of 12 feet or 20 feet for shared driveways. So this is the point of versioning I wanted to point out. There's a numeral 2 in this section that was mistakenly included, and staff is not proposing this. We're not proposing the language except as provided in this subparagraph. Curb cuts on a lot are limited to 1 per street frontage and a maximum width of 24 feet. Staff is not recommending that. Why are we looking at curb cuts? Reducing the width and number of curb cuts for driveways reduces potential conflict points between pedestrians and automobiles entering or leaving a property. It's really just about getting those numbers down. We've also proposed slight changes in the relationship between driveway entrances and alleyways. We're proposing developments may locate entrances to parking areas off of any adjacent alleyways. And then enclosed parking spaces no longer must be 20 feet from alleyways. They do still need to be 20 feet from roadways. We're proposing these to facilitate front of the lot really as a safe pedestrian zone. Again, bringing the sidewalk and even those dismounting from a bicycle or stepping out of a parked vehicle on the curb, bringing them to the entrance of the building to interact with that land use without needing to cross the driveway or a parking area. We want to enhance walkability, just in general, of entire neighborhoods, sort of at a neighborhood and block level. Removing the 20-foot requirement does increase the buildable area on a lot, being able to scoot a driveway back toward an alley. And then just in general, create greater standardization of the code. The fewer if-then contingencies that we have in the code, if you're next to this district, if you're next to this land use, the more predictable the code can be. And that's a general best practice for creating a development code. This is just a visual representation and taking a moment to send virtually, but this is 1901 Carroll, just an example of a shared driveway serving 5 attached homes. You can see on the left side of the picture, there's a small segment of an improved alleyway that feeds one side of the shared driveway. And if you look down at the right side of the building, there's only one additional curb cut. And so we are going to be encouraging developers to limit curb cuts as much as possible. We want pedestrians to be able to walk safely from one side of a building to the other with as few collision points, conflict points with vehicles as possible. Let's talk about pedestrian paths. We're proposing requiring protected pedestrian paths through parking lots, 65 feet from every space. So if you look at a typical superstore at a Target or a Walmart parking lot, you imagine the columns, and we have a picture of this later. Imagine the columns extending closer to the door. This is about every second column so that people are close to a protected 4-foot wide intact path. May count sidewalks in good repair as long as they're within the required distance. As these cross drive aisles, they should be raised to the level of the sidewalk and of contrasting color and texture. This slows vehicles. Again, it marks very visually the protected area where pedestrian traffic is prioritized. And then every property in general must have a continuous path from the sidewalk to the front door. Why are we doing this? Still in line with everything we've said, we're designating a safe, accessible space for pedestrians, whether they're parking or whether they're wanting to walk from the sidewalk through the parking lot so that they can access the building. Okay, a couple of visuals here on the left. This is Target at Haskell and 75, just showing the length of 65 feet. On the right is a pretty idealized diagram of a very nice parking lot, if I say so myself, where every parking spot is immediately adjacent to a pathway. This is not exactly what we're requiring, but it's an example of what we would love to see as any other big box retail or office are constructed. I do want to go back to the topic of what's different about this proposal compared to the framework discussed in 2021. There were quite a few design and locational standards that we had talked about, from increased tree coverage requirements to managing retention basins, integration between stormwater management and landscaping on site, sidewalk widths, stricter prohibitions on curb cuts, locational requirements around garages and drive-throughs, screening, and then impervious surface maximums. A couple of notes here: impervious surface maximums are being looked at in a current ongoing study of their own impermeable surface on a lot. My colleague Lori Levy is handling that study, and so that's receiving attention of its own. And some of these more environmental standards are being considered as incentives in that study. However, we did want to just call out that these have been talked about previously. Mostly these have been removed from this portion of the study just to increase the expediency of this study. We've received very explicit calls to bring this off-street parking and loading code amendment to City Council. So we want to get it there. If any of these really do rise to the importance of needing to be added, they do still live within the conceptual scope of parking. Similarly, if anything that we have included really is unimportant or is deemed by this body to do more damage, you don't want to include it in the recommendation. There can be a change to those as well. Staff, of course, have proposed what we've proposed. We want to get this to City Council, but again, did want to acknowledge a difference there. A quick note on bicycle parking. There were some minor changes there, just shifting bicycle parking requirements from 1 space per 25 required vehicular parking spaces to 1 bike space per 20 provided vehicular parking spaces. We clarified terminology, dimensional requirements, bike rack preferences. In the future, we would like to see bike rack requirements and bike parking requirements attached to something other than vehicular parking. Moving it to what is the question. And so again, this works for Dallas, that Dallas is going to remain a very auto-oriented city for a while. Even as we move toward greater walkability and greater bikeability in the future, we think that this could be something worth looking at. How do we manage bike parking totally independently of vehicular parking? Now let's talk about the Transportation Demand Management Plan and Site Plan Review. These are two topics, but we're going to sort of discuss them as one because they overlap greatly. Staff is proposing to change the site plan review threshold of estimated trip generation from 6,000 trips per day or 500 trips per day per acre to 1,000 trips per day or 100 trips per peak hour. Now the 1,000 trips per day, 100 trips per hour, this is functionally what our Department of Transportation staff uses anyway to signal the possible need of a deeper traffic study. Should there be a traffic light around this development, et cetera. 100 trips per hour roughly translates to 140 dwelling units in a multifamily building, 7,000 square feet of general retail, 500,000 square feet of a warehouse. Funny enough, skipping to the end, only 667 square feet of coffee shop, a drive-through coffee shop. Drive-throughs still required traffic study anyway, but that's just for some context. So we're unable to identify exactly where the 6,000 trips per day came from. That's huge. That's a lot. I think someone said that's a hotel of about 850 units. We're bringing this down to match what our Department of Transportation review staff already go by as a rule of thumb. Site plan is now also required when the land uses on the lot collectively reach a TDMP threshold set in the new 4.804 section. this program, and actually before I read this, I'm going to wait for the virtual feed to catch up just so people can read along with the purpose of a TDMP. Let's see. All right. This program requires developments to incorporate a minimum amount of design features, incentives, and tools to accommodate and encourage use of a multimodal transportation system. The applicant must choose from a menu of TDM strategies in the Transportation Demand Management Program Guide, which is going to be a synonymous document alongside these code amendments, each of which provides a set number of points that sum to a target number of points determined by development type, location, and other criteria. So to put this another way, a development comes in, we see that they match one of the thresholds, and we'll show that table later on. They match one of the thresholds. For instance, they're developing 140 new units in a multifamily building. They're assigned a number of points, and then they need to choose from strategies to add up to that target number of points. This is the table that we're proposing to codify in our development code. Residential has 3 categories, and really within those, the 140 or more dwelling units is the important one. The 2 categories below those will see pretty minor point targets in the program guide. Really, this isn't meant to be a burden on small developments. This is just meant to begin to integrate consideration of multimodal travel into these developments. For the non-residential side, we have a few categories. Non-residential that has 20,000 to 99,999 square feet of gross floor area. Any work resulting in a drive-through or drive-in component, or any commercial amusement inside or outside containing 100,000 square feet of gross floor area or more. Additionally, any construction project that provides more than 99 new parking spaces, or if the director comes across a really unique development that needs to go through a TDMP process at their discretion, they can call it aside. There are 3 review types: minor, major, and discretionary. The minor, you're assigned a point target and you just have to implement strategies to meet that target. For the major, you need to meet the point target and submit a transportation impact analysis. And then, of course, discretionary for any of those unique developments that the director will want to set aside. Before I go on, a table like this will live in the program guide along with the strategies and their assigned points, but each of these categories will have their point totals. So for instance, the top row, a residential building containing 20 to 49 dwelling units, will show that it needs a minor review type, and then it might need 5 points, 10 points as a target. The guide is being developed right now along with this code amendment. It's probably at about 95%. It won't be entered into the code like the code amendments we're talking about today, but it will need a city council resolution. And we hope to bring it to the city council along with the off-street parking code amendment. This is just an example. There might be some formatting changes, but overall we have categories and then subcategories. So categories include transit, shared mobility, parking management solutions, and others. Subcategories within active transportation, let's talk about bicycles. Let's talk about bike facilities, for example. And then specific strategies, like providing 150%, 200% of the required bike parking. Each of these, of course, have a point total, and any development team going through this process can mix and match, assemble from these strategies as fits their development and as fits the multimodal system infrastructure as it exists in the broader neighborhood and block around their development. A TDMP submission will be reviewed by Department of Transportation staff at the engineering phase of development and should include a sustainable modes analysis, description of the plan, a site plan illustrating the strategies, if necessary, then a traffic impact analysis. a commitment to provide annual status reports for 2 years after the C of O is granted, and assignment of a mobility coordinator associated with that property that staff can reach out to. Compliance with TDMP strategies can be confirmed at any time by staff with, of course, appropriate notice. This is what we're kind of considering a light touch version. These TDMP programs exist all around the country and around the world. We are not venturing to measure the impact of the TDMP on vehicle miles traveled at this time. Other cities do venture to assign sort of specific VMT results. The impact of these strategies is so context specific that really attempting to establish, standardize, and codify an expectation of VMT reduction loses realistic accuracy. This will apply site by site across the city, but the true impact will really be on citywide transportation systems, citywide transportation culture. So let's go to the frequently asked questions. We have several of these, then we'll look at timeline, and then that will be it for the presentation. And I think we can go to testimony or other staff comments. I need to drive to carry my kids around, or because I have mobility impairments that prevent me from using other forms of transportation. How am I supported? The road is still yours. Parking spaces are still there. Reforms like this allow those who can get off the road to choose other transportation options, which leaves you with a less congested driving experience. ADA requirements for accessible parking remain, so those with mobility issues will still be provided for under the law. And resulting change from this amendment will be very slow. And this is something that we've said in the past and will be a common theme, I think, in responses to these questions and concerns. It's going to be a very slow impact. Most of us will not see much of an impact to our driving environment at all. My area is uniquely low density, and my community relies on our cars. Won't this make life significantly harder for us? This amendment simply allows parking to adjust to the needs of the land use and transportation culture over time, rather than artificially inflating the amount of parking, which actually incentivizes us to drive more than we would otherwise. And in our August ZOAC meeting, there were mentioned a couple of studies, and I'm happy to get those to anyone interested after this meeting that show exactly this. As we build more parking, that causes us to drive more. Developers of commercial and residential properties are still under a great amount of pressure by lenders, tenants, and visitors to build plenty of parking. Excuse me as I take a look at my notes for a moment. Even if I want to use other transportation options, my life is based around driving for the foreseeable future. Now, again, we're not proposing maximums. We're not removing parking spaces. Your usual destinations will still provide parking. No one is being forced to change the lifestyle. Change from this will be very slow, giving us time to adjust if we see fit. I'll bring up now and probably one or two more times before we're done today, the Department of Transportation's on-street parking and curb management policy, which offers the most appropriate tools and options for ensuring open parking spaces and more targeted comprehensive parking management, targeted and comprehensive, for any specific district or neighborhood in the compact areas that automobiles need to arrive to. I live in a low density neighborhood next to multifamily buildings that already produce parking along the public curb in front of my house. Won't this just increase? Many multifamily buildings already produce some spillover parking because they charge a monthly or annual fee for parking that tenants opt out of. This is already allowed and taken advantage of. And so this isn't a factor of the amount of parking provided right now. This is just a factor of how that's managed by many multifamily building operators. And then as one of our ZOAC members has said to me, this is a line that has really stuck with me. We really need to inspect what we expect, get down to brass tacks, find all of the links in the chain. In order for a multifamily property to justify removing parking spaces, they would need to expect a financial benefit from their loss. Parking spaces still are an amenity that they're providing to their tenants, commercial tenants, residential tenants, et cetera. For multifamily, this means increasing rentable space or units, which is extremely expensive compared to profit margins. So due often to the layout of a parking lot, and right now I'm thinking about many multifamily buildings, for instance, in far north Dallas, where parking is sort of snaked in between buildings. It's not clustered in one place where a new building could be added. There's no way really to replace parking spaces incrementally with enough rentable space to make it make sense at the bottom line. I live on a low density block right next to a popular commercial corridor where parking minimums limit growth, maintain the existing built form, and keep out undesirable land uses. Mixed use neighborhoods like this should exist throughout Dallas and really are planned for in our comprehensive planning documents. Bringing these throughout Dallas diverts really the potential traffic to these more localized destinations. And so these mixed use neighborhoods really specialize in serving hyper-local residents. Increases in value are also changing the nature of which businesses can locate in many of these high-value areas. The appropriateness of land uses really from urban planning best practices should be targeted with land use regulations, amendments, and alternative zoning tools rather than parking regulations. And then again, the Department of Transportation's on-street parking and curb management policy is the right place to craft the most appropriate tools. In the end, if no other functional tools are available, if nuisances manifest, if the rational nexus is shown, PDs still remain as an opportunity for localized parking minimums if a specific area needs that solution. Won't new design requirements burden development too greatly and slow down development of housing and businesses? The proposed design requirements limiting curb cuts, requiring pedestrian paths, and moving parking to the rear or side of a lot are really currently considered best practices in land use and are used in other cities around the country successfully. These aren't strange or experimental. These have existed in development contexts for a while. These standards move the city firmly toward achieving its adopted vision of being a safe, desirable, convenient place to walk and live. And then, as said before, amendments to Chapter 51A should be tuned to the majority of development cases. Truly special cases can make use of other established tools such as waivers, variances, exceptions, etc. And then some future actions. What else is the city considering regarding parking regulations? Again, Department of Transportation's on-street parking and curb management study is moving forward. It's being briefed today at the Council's Council's Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. That's at 1 o'clock. We have an ongoing impermeable surfaces code amendment that will affect off-street parking. And then the comprehensive code reform affecting buildable area setbacks, etc., is being formed right now. It's underway. It's expected to take a couple of years, and the scope and details are being worked out right now. Let's talk timeline for just a moment. Of course, as mentioned before, expediency is one of the priorities with this. And so the fastest timeline, if ZOAC today makes a motion and sends this on to the CPC as it is, the City Plan Commission could see it on January 18th. There's just a little bit of time there because of the holidays. And then if they pass it on, if they recommend it to the City Council, it could go to the Council potentially April. Could see a briefing at Council in March and potentially a vote in April. We know that there is a lot here. There are new members of the ZOAC, and we've also included in this presentation several items that we can discuss and might want to be changed from the proposal. If this does need to come back for another ZOAC meeting, that would probably be January 16th, and generally would push the timeline forward a month or two. And then one more note down there at the bottom, 1 o'clock today, on-street parking and curb management policy at the Council Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I think at this time, I think at this time, I was wanting to ask the chief planner if she had anything sort of to add before sending it over. And then I think some member of our design staff might be here. I'm not sure, but maybe we should send it on to the chair.
Yes.
Okay. Back to you.
Okay. We have any questions for staff before we hear from our speakers? Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for the report on all the amount of work that you've gone into this. This is some of the best work I've seen staff do. So it tells me two things, that the city is serious about they're serious about this issue, and they're putting their very good resources on it. It also gives me a sense of confidence and trusting. It's great to know that I can trust the work and thought that went into it. I have a couple questions. I need help understanding a little bit better how the mechanics of the transportation demand management plan works. It's a point system, and then we're getting points that allow developers breaks on design standards, environmental design standards, or what? Just take me through that a little more.
Sure. So a development comes in, it reaches one of the thresholds in the table that let's say it's a 20-unit apartment building. They are assigned a point total, let's say 10 points, for example. They need to choose from the strategies to reach that point total. So they need to install an extra bike rack, provide real-time transit information, and in the program guide, each of those strategies are assigned a point. So for instance, add an extra bike rack, that will give you 5 of the 10 points that you need to achieve. Provide real-time transit information, that might be another 3 of the 10 points you need to achieve. And so in order for your site plan to be approved, you need to reach that point target.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then connected to that, the environmental design standards that are not included, and I know staff has sort of a big catalog of those. Is there anything in the current language that would prevent in years to come, as mindsets change, to add some of those standards to the same point system?
Nothing prevents that.
Okay.
Actually, that's a good point. The reason that those points were not entered into the code, but are kept as a separate program guide, is just for easier updates over time.
Okay. Last question is, why weren't maximums included?
You know, much of this is being proposed considering the unique culture and context of Dallas and the expediency with which we want to see minimums removed on the staff side. And so maximums at the moment would add quite a bit of time. And we're just not sure that they would be realistic right now. You mentioned minds changing and updating over time on environmental things. This can come back to staff at any time to consider maximums.
Okay. And legal question related to that, is any of the language eliminating requirements as opposed to eliminating minimums that could prevent us in the future from incorporating maximums, because the maximums are required? Has there been thought given to how the language is changing? I did not review the whole change in the code, but can you guys have any idea about that?
If you're asking if we're proposing anything that would prohibit future maximums,
That's what I'm asking.
we're not.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Other questions for staff?
Sure, I have some. I also want to give staff a lot of praise, delightful presentation, very informative. I've been following this along since 2020. Really great. So I really have very few comments on the provision of parking section. I do have a question about the loading. So if we're opening this up to kind of staff discretion, loading, what kind of guidelines, if we're trying to give some kind of regulatory certainty to developments on off-street loading requirements are we talking about? I saw you remove the dimensional standards, which were quite large for, and sometimes it might make no sense, but what are staff's thoughts on the off-street loading, which can be significant?
I will speak for PUD and then I want to call it Department of Transportation staff also for that.
Okay.
In general, we want to provide flexibility and foster the conversation. And so even as we're taking some of these exact numbers away, regulatory certainty, the regulatory certainty is still there in that all the same guidelines are there. It needs to not inhibit use of the right of way for pedestrians or vehicles, using parking area, using the right of way. And so really, this is meant to be flexible, but targeted, succinct language toward if you foresee needing loading, talk to our Department of Transportation staff. And I think we have a representative from Department of Transportation. Would you mind speaking, David, to loading and that conversation? And we might need.
But I'll be brief. We don't have a perfect example of the efforts that city staff is doing right now is that we don't have loading requirements for multifamily developments. And therefore, anyone showing up at permitting understands that there are no requirements for loading requirements. And yet administratively, some might even say subjectively, we ask the question, so where is your loading going to take place? And that's a very difficult conversation to have with some applicants sometimes because they come in knowing that there are no requirements. It doesn't mean that multifamily developments don't have loading trucks every Saturday morning moving furniture. And so those are conversations that we have ad hoc where we want to make sure that the property will not have an impact on adjacent properties. And we're doing that without any standards. We're doing that because the city of Dallas is doing what we're supposed to be doing, being responsible in how we review private development without any standard. What our team is doing is proposing a set of guidelines that would alert the applicants that even though there are no requirements, there's still a conversation that takes place every time at permitting to make sure that we understand where loading spaces are going to take place. Will it be on the curb? Is there loading space within private property? Maybe the height is not sufficient for those vehicles and therefore we got to go back and understand that it's going to be happening on the street. And if that's the case, then what type of signs are needed well in advance and not as a reactive approach when it becomes a problem to adjacent property owners.
Moving on from off-street loading, talking about some of the TDMP. So why is this being tied to a review and the review type threshold? Why are they tied to dwelling units and square footage rather than parking provision? Because if we're talking about mode share goals and trying to reduce parking demand or demand for certain means of getting there, why is it tied to something that's not related necessarily to mode share? Dwelling units, you have 100 dwelling units, you provide zero parking, then there's not very much demand for parking. But if you have a 100 square foot building, you provide 100 square feet, 100 parking spaces because you're an automobile dealership, for example, you have a lot of demand for parking. So what's the thought behind setting the threshold based on dwelling units and square feet rather than parking provision?
The thought of it was that square footage and dwelling units especially are tied to the use of the property. And so, like you said, a 200 unit apartment building, no parking. Not sure if we'll see that in Dallas in the near future. This is a little bit by proxy, but it is operating under the assumption that new developments will be accessed with vehicles, and that tying this to some general metric. And of course, in an ideal world, we could go ask every potential user, so how are you going to access the site? And then build points. That can't do that, of course. And so tying it again to the square footage to the number of dwelling units, again, really is a proxy. The point totals are meant to be updated and revised as this is put into process and data is gathered for development. And that also is really meant to be a conversation. Again, this is meant to address larger developments. Some of these strategies, again, that would be applied to smaller developments are just providing information, really accessible kinds of things.
Okay. Yeah, well, what I would like to see is that there is both, before you start triggering these kind of reviews, that there's both we have to fulfill two of the requirements, both a dwelling unit count and a square footage count, as well as a number of parking spaces provided. That way, you're not asking them to do twice the work, do the work twice. If you're already going out of a lot of trouble not to provide the parking, then you've already met your travel demand management plan. I know if I look at other TDMPs out there, like Minneapolis, simply not providing parking is already gets you to, all the minimum points you would need. Or if you're looking at other cities, gets you there, but rather they not have to go through the or to go through the process of a TDMP if you're already not hitting both of these thresholds, dwelling units and parking spaces provided. And could be a little bit more generous on both of those numbers at 100. If TDMP starts coming into play at maybe 100 parking spaces, that seems like an appropriate number for the Dallas area. 20 dwelling units is very small. I mean, it's a minor review, but if we were to up those thresholds to somewhere maybe around like if you're providing more than a space per dwelling unit and you're having more than 100 dwelling units on a site, that's where I would think it would be appropriate number for things to start to kick in. Because what I got a big picture on PNP where I've seen this, it can get quite heavy-handed. If I reviewed other cities, places where I've seen like in North America, Vancouver, they're very extensive and they're very burdensome. They're almost as bad as parking requirements themselves, and you're kind of wondering what we're going to do. Like the parking requirements itself is a citywide TDMP plan. We're removing a certain minimum supply that creates the demand that goes with it. What I don't want to see is that our return a really great thing where we're replacing one of the most burdensome parts of the development process in Dallas with an almost as burdensome process with a TDMP, which is really kind of outsourced. We're trying to put right-of-way management and transportation goals on private property rather than controlling the right-of-way and through city policy tools that we already have. We're trying to hit those goals and be a lot more effective done through the right-of-way rather than trying to get people to take transit because we gave them, their bus route information that anybody can get online anyway. So I personally I don't know if TDMP even makes sense at all because we're trying to remove a burdensome process, parking requirements with a different burdensome process. So at the very least, it needs to be scaled back to be a much lighter touch. I would consider just removing it entirely because I don't think it's necessary if we're already doing parking reform here.
Can I respond for a second? Thank you for the comment. The way we're thinking and the way we're seeing the transportation demand management is just a shift in culture of development and of using the buildings. Instead of I access a building or I develop a building for car access, I develop and I access a building by multiple ways. So it's also a mode, instead of looking in the code and looking what is my parking requirement, looking in the code to say, okay, I need to provide adequate access to this building. And we want to encourage that type to search where is your most proximity dart station? What is the state of the sidewalk? Where is your loading space? Or do you have drop-off pickup? Where is that in? These little details to make sure that we make developers and the public, obviously, thinking of access to a property doesn't mean car only. It means pedestrians, bikers. It has to imply a level bit of safety. So that's why we dialed it down. Our intent is to start shifting a little bit the culture of how are you using the city. We have other means of transportation, we have other means of access. And that applies to developers as well. In our experience, in areas that are transit rich, the type of development is the same as areas that are not transit rich, meaning a lot of parking is provided in areas that are transit rich. We would like to start conversations formally with the city, and we want the city to send this signal to the market to say, hey, this is a transit rich area. Can we please talk about your proximity to transit? Do you want to partner with DART on something? This is the type of message we're trying to send. You're in a TOD, it has to be different. Don't come to the city to say, I have 1,000 parking spaces in downtown, 1,000 parking spaces in a TOD. That's not what we want. We want to flip the script a little bit. So that's the purpose of the PDM.
Yeah, I
Keep
oh,
say something.
Mr. Duras.
Mr. Navarro wants to say something about the same thing, I think.
We're lining up to speak.
Yeah.
My name is David Navarez. We review, last month, in the month of November, we received a total of 78 private development reviews. And that was, I think that's the average this year, though every month changes. I want to clarify that we, during our engineering review, we're already doing a transportation demand management review administratively without any guidance. And in many instances, it sort of prices developers. And in many instances, because we don't have a set of guidelines, it's left until the very last minute. And we tell them, we cannot release your project until you help us understand the impact of your development and what you're doing to reduce that. What are you doing to improve the pedestrian amenities of your site? And it's very bad news for development when, one, they're caught by surprise at the very last minute of the review process, which is engineering. They come in with their consultants and their consultants let them know, but that's not a requirement. But we are already doing it. We want to understand how private development is impacting our roads. How can they make improvements that are ADA compliant in the public right of way because of their impacts, and we need help. And I'm speaking from city staff's perspective. We need help to establish a set of guidelines. Number one, informing developments that the review is happening. Number two, following a set of guidelines that are not subjective or following other standards from other cities, because that's essentially what we have to do, but rather something that is enacted and established by city council. That's essentially what we're asking for. And I completely agree with the vision that our colleagues are establishing in the transportation management review process. From our perspective, I'm speaking more selfishly and saying we need it because we're already doing it, but developers are caught by surprise. And we ultimately, I'm very thankful to the development community because we always end up collaborating, but we need that to be at the front of the review process and not at the very end of it.
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, but did we conclude Mr. Bear's questions?
is it the same topic? I have some.
It is, but go ahead.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, well, that was all mine on TDMP, if you want to. You can.
Okay, sure. Relatedly, I think I was curious from Mr. Navarez, why it's kind of getting missed, the need for traffic study or the TDMP or TDM. And are those thresholds clear? Are there currently thresholds for when that is required? And how does what is proposed relate to what is currently in place?
So the first question is regarding thresholds and how it affects. Currently, we give that a responsibility to the engineer of record. We tell them that, in our opinion, a traffic study is needed. This is 100% of permitting. There are no requirements in the city of Dallas for a traffic study unless you have 6,000 trips, which is, bigger than Redbird Mall, for example.
Okay.
Redbird Mall wouldn't even require.
So it's more subjective, is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. So we use the numbers that Michael Wade presented as a guideline. And we let the engineer of record, we believe that a traffic study is needed. We don't say it like that. We say, provide a traffic study. The engineer of record then comes back saying, we don't think that a traffic study is needed, David. And I save that on my files because someone from transportation or public works or other departments one day will come back to us and say, where's the traffic study for this development? Happens. And so we give that a responsibility to the engineer of record because we don't have those standards codified.
Right, and it seems like that's something this proposal is attempting to do, is codify that and
So that
give some
you as the
benchmark.
developer are aware of what is coming your way,
Mhm.
well in advance, and but it would not change the level of collaboration that city staff has with the development team and figuring out that what we're doing is in the interest of their developments and their neighbors. With a very set, well-established set of plans.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just to echo Mr. Barrett's comments a little bit, I'm recalling, I think 2020, when Ms. May may have mentioned staff spends 80% of their time on parking. I don't,
I think it was a little lower.
I don't recall what it was, but it was significant, okay?
Yeah.
And so just to echo, I think, not replacing complexity with complexity but at the same time codifying Mr. Navarro's point, I think it's hugely important because, should not be open to interpretation or gray area. So we just also echo the applause for, I think, a multifaceted look at parking in the development code as relates to off-street parking. Especially, appreciate the mention of minimizing curb cuts and utilization of the alleys. I've said this many times, ZOAC, but I think a lot of our regulations disproportionately affect smaller operators and smaller businesses. And so I think I mentioned the example of a 20-foot driveway for a 3-unit building is the same as a 200-unit building, right? So encouraging the minimization of curb cuts and the use of alleys. I appreciate the kind of multifaceted approach to that as well as it affects smaller operators.
Thank you.
I want to look at parking and design standards. I might have a couple of questions. It appears as though in your presentation that you're making design standards and what you're letting parking impact design standards, i.e. in big box retail. Direct access, what you said was direct access from curb to front door. And as I look at a lot of big box design when it comes to parking and actual access from curb to front door, your standards are contrary to what's being done. And when I've asked, because sometimes it's a little dysfunctional in order to get from direct access, you got to go here and then and they say it's safety. It's an intentional standard for preservation of health and of a big box store. So are you saying that your standards would alter what development is requiring in order to design a big box retail? And you're not allowing, or we're not allowing that big box retail to set their own standards?
Without knowing exactly the designs that you're
Oh,
talking about.
Okay, I can tell you. No store that I regularly frequent has a direct access from the curb to the front door. You can't do it. And it's an intentional design standard. When you come in, you have to, when you drive it, you don't have direct access. You don't have, the front is here, the street is there, and you can come straight in and out. It's just intentionally designed. You come in, you have to make a turn. You come in, you have to make another turn.
When you're in your car.
And when you're in your car and even when you're walking, there's no direct access from curb to front door. You gotta make a turn, or you gotta, and it's an intentional design standard that the majority of the big box stores today, whether it's Dallas, whether it's, and I have to say LA because I'm from there, but, or even when I've gone to recently to Scottsdale, all of their design standards does not operate in the design standard you're requesting in this presentation. Are you saying that is going to be the design standard, or are you gonna let a developer make their own standards according to how their needs are being met?
We've met, a quick one real quick. If I can. We believe that they're not contrary, so we're not saying it has to be a straight pedestrian path, or that every pedestrian path has to connect the far reach of the sidewalk immediately directly through a parking lot. So it does very much depend on the situation. Again, a small parking lot, there's sidewalks, use the sidewalks, no big deal. Again, it doesn't have to be a straight path shooting if it needs to jump and dodge. And then, of course, I imagine that there are some of the vehicular designs that are all about slowing cars down, which is great.
And people,
It's slowing people down.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and in your design, in your presentation, you showed direct access from curb, a walkable from curb to front door. We don't live in a world where developers want, or even big box retailers want that kind of direct access anymore. With all of the, I hate to say it, the grab and run, they need to slow them down. Your picture, your show, not that as a standard, but as contrary to what big box needs in order to be functionally adequate, for lack of a better way of putting it.
And I just wanted to point out that, we're not specifically changing particular land uses, as we do have a specific land use for what we normally call big boxes, and it's called a general merchandise or food store of 100,000 square feet or more. And those are only allowed by right in the regional retail and central area districts, and otherwise they're by SUP only in CR, CS, LI, in the CR district. So, and an RAR, see, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And it also has provisions in there for these other design standards that are already in the code that do talk about parking lots and access and screening and things like that. But I think we're focusing on, how do people get from their parked cars into the building? And the main point is that we want people to be able to get to a protected walkway, from their cars so they can get inside swiftly. But okay, you're staying from the sidewalk.
I think I would add pointedly to the question that if a big box retailer is wanting to inhibit pedestrian access to and from their store.
Direct.
Sure, by that you mean straight, and the
Right.
illustrations we gave were straight, but they don't have to be straight. We're not requiring that in the code. Those are just the pictures. If they're.
But you said direct access and you're, and
Right,
then
it doesn't
you,
mean straight.
okay, but but make sure that in the presentation, your presentation says direct access, and when you put up a picture, it shows direct access, but now you're saying something contrary to what the presentation was saying, and the only thing I'm saying is, if the inference is a retail, 1,000 square foot or larger would need to have a straight line from curb to front door. And what you're verbally, the picture showed one thing and you're verbally saying something different. And the only thing the question I'm trying to drill down to is they need to say the same thing. What your words say and what your pictures say and what you write needs to say the same thing, because otherwise it looks contrary.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Then, you're saying that the presentation of, parking, it looks at the city as equitable. And it looks at the city as everything is equal when it's not. You're asking for walkability. And I hear you when you say it's over time, but I understand over time does not necessarily equate when we see design and zoning cases today. If you're looking at areas that DART does not even service, and you're saying here that there should be a partnership with DART, and there's major areas of the city DART does not even service, so you'll never be able to be walkable. So is parking reform at its infancy, should it not include a DART reform first that says that DART must service so you can implement this process throughout the whole entire city? And so that the reform is equitable and it is able to be rolled out consistently, because as it is today, you can't have walkability where you have no DART.
There are a couple of points I think in response to that. So first of all, you're absolutely right. DART isn't everywhere in Dallas. And we're very aware of that. If the city of Dallas really had control over DART's program, it might look different than it does today. It's an important distinction to make that as we reduce minimums to zero, parking spaces are still being built even today in situations where developers can drastically reduce the parking that they're providing. They'll remove maybe 2 spaces, 3 spaces. And so even though this looks like parking will become zero, it really won't. So all of the space, all of our residents that live in low density areas, they will still be provided for with parking. It will just change slowly with culture and with transit. As you're saying, of course, walkability includes more than just transit. It includes how we position our buildings together. And then conversely, as transit plans are being created, they look at density and they look at the density that can often only be created as you lower parking in an area. And so it's a ping pong back and forth, transit, walkability, transportation, land use. But we really want to accentuate that removing these minimums isn't erasing parking spaces. It's not erasing ADA spaces. There slowly are situations mounting across the country where either minimums are being reduced, have been totally eradicated, and a multifamily building will still be built, but with a handful fewer spaces that were extra anyway.
I still challenge that. I have high density in District 8. But I don't have dark. I don't have a bus line. I have high density. I can have over 2,000 dwelling units, single family dwelling units and square mile, and I don't have dark. That's high density in my opinion. And you don't have DART services, which means that community is high density, not low density. And it is auto-centric because you have no choice. It's not bike. They don't ride bikes, they don't walk, they drive. I have, and based on what you're saying, I have a high density duplex development that came in. Not even been 3 months, it's already underparked. They don't have parking spaces. And what I'm saying is, I'm asking you guys, how do you manage reform when reforms are not providing the equity that you're saying it should? How do we balance that so that I don't get a development that's underparked from day one? And I don't have DART services to support walkability. And I would love to have everything equal, but it's not. How do we balance that? And how do we write this amendment so that I don't see the continuation of that? How do we put because when you say the minimums are 0 and development takes that to mean I can make smaller, non-functional development and people are parking on wherever, then it's not equitable. How do we write this so that you get what you want for the portion of the city that is being written for, but the portion of the city that it's not being written for is still cared for?
I've often heard in the off-street parking reform discussions that are going around, nationwide, that one of the inequitable things about our current system is that since parking is required to be constructed at a minimum ratio that may not have anything to do with the community that it's located within, those parking spaces obviously cost the property owner taxes, they have to build it, they have to pay it off, they have to mortgage it. And so that service of a parking space gets rolled into whatever that consumer is purchasing. So for our residents that can't afford a car, don't have a car, they are being unjustly burdened with the additional costs of providing those parking spaces. And that's how the general off-street parking reform discussions nationwide generally, that's where I've seen the most discussion about equity is, are we bundling all those costs of building excess parking into what people can't afford? And is it increasing the cost of our services that are provided throughout the city? Not only in, your grocery bill, but also your housing, and all these other things that people pay various services for.
If I could insert myself here, I'd like to get to our public testimony. because we've got some people that have been waiting an hour and a half so far. I think it would be good. I've got a number of questions. I appreciate the questions on the TDMP. I think that's a big topic in my book, but we can get back to. Committee member Reeves, did you have any questions, or can we move on to public testimony?
Yeah, I probably had about 5 minutes, maybe 10 of stuff total, once they were answered.
Would we be able to hold those till after the public?
Yeah, sure, that'd be fine.
Let's do that, because I'm going to come up on a hard stop here before too long anyway. So, Ms. May, can you
Yes.
kind of lead us on that?
Yeah, so we had 5 registered speakers. I'm just gonna call the name. I didn't see many of them on our attendees list, but if you're in the audience, please listen for your name. And if it's all right with the chair, I'll just go ahead and mention, we also normally allow people that showed up in the audience to also have a turn at the podium, but we'll just do our registered speakers first since they registered beforehand. So we have John Tenney, Michael Northrup, Cindy Helstern, and Ed Zahara. I know I saw Mr. Zahara. I may have said that wrong online, but is there anybody else here in person from that list? Okay, great. Oh, okay, yes. Anybody from the list that I just called? Okay, well, let me go ahead and do you mind if we call the first 1 or 2 people in person, and I'm gonna get it through to Zahara or Zara. All right, so if there's somebody in the audience that would like to speak, if you would come to the podium, and we have these yellow cards here so that we can get your full name, how it's spelled, and your address, and if you could start with your name and your address. And Vice Chair, were you keeping time?
Yes, how many minutes are we giving?
Speak to.
2?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll have 2 minutes. Yeah.
Ready? John Hetzel, 2622 Commerce Street. I'll try to be real quick with 2 minutes. One of the largest long-term property owners in both Depot and Lower Greenville, as well as having a number of traditional shopping centers and multifamily developments. I think both parking reforms that's really needed in this city. In the case of Lower Greenville and Deep Ellum, we do have one district which has essentially no parking requirement for all buildings, and another district that has almost full parking requirements. I've done a use analysis between the districts, and the ratio of uses are very similar between them, despite the fact that the parking rules are very different. And the North Central Texas Council of Governments is actually about to publish a parking study for Deep Ellum that's going to show that at peak Saturday nights, we're at maxed out at 86% utilization. The market has responded to the parking demand in Deep Ellum, even though there was not a parking requirement. That's why you see the new paid public parking garages going up. But that being said, I do understand single-family residential concerns near places like Lower Greenville. So I think it's important to discuss things like parking management districts, RPO enforcement, to mitigate the potential negative effects of code parking. As an example, on Lower Greenville, when we did the Trader Joe's there, we had to park 1.5 times what code required because Trader Joe's demanded it. The parking requirement could have been 0, but Trader Joe's would have made me build a bigger lot. If I have restaurants that can't drive sales and customers because we don't have enough parking, they can't pay rent. So we are very motivated to make sure that there is parking available on a rational basis. And even in a more traditional suburban setting, we own the shopping center at the southeast corner of Mockingbird and Abrams. We are within code parking by 1 space. So the new Merit Coffee can't do a small little patio up front because I can't afford to lose 1 space. We can't have roads to the ingress and egress of that shopping center because I can't lose 1 space. But we obviously have plenty of parking because the institutional patents Christmas tree sale is going on right now. They suck up half the parking lot and we still have plenty of spaces available. But according to code, we don't have enough. And so I just encourage people to hopefully understand that market demand will be there. You know, we're doing micro-unit apartment complexes, doing mixed income housing development bonus. We're going 2 spaces under code on that one, even though we could go to 50% because we feel like people still need that place. Thank you.
Thank you.
I made Mr. Zara a panelist, but I don't see his camera on just yet. So whenever he's able to turn his camera on, maybe we can go to him. But if there's anybody else in the audience that wanted to have a few minutes?
Press the button.
Let it go.
Thank you. My name is Hexel, Colorado. I live at 1509 Main Street here in Dallas. I'm glad I came because I enjoyed the questions from ZOAC, from the committee. Regarding Mr. Barrett's comment, I get the idea of trying to recognize that if someone is going against the pressures of lenders and investors and tenant expectations and culture, why implement a TDMP, some kind of point system, if they're already fighting back in some way? And I thought, yeah, that was a really good idea. But staff's response was actually very poignant, which is that we also have to be mindful of single mode planning. Just last month, I was in Deep Ellum. I was at the one of the taco places. I can't remember. I had a few drinks, and I had my bike stolen for the first time. And I had put it. The nearest bike stall was a little bit of an inconvenient walk away, so I thought I'd take my chance and just keep it behind me. If we imagined a development where they did the great thing of not having any parking, but they did so under the understanding that all of their residents and tenants and patrons could just Uber in, that's not an equitable solution either. And so I would like to know that as we move forward from this chapter, we're still accounting for equal access for everybody versus someone who's like, oh, well, we don't need parking because everyone's got their personal chauffeur or they've got this or that. On the topic of design standards, I'm actually very, very relieved to see things like rear parking or side parking, or making sure that vehicles are not separating direct access from the street, from the curb, from the sidewalk. Because earlier in January, I have it on video of me getting hit by a car crossing the driveway.
That was 2 minutes, thank you.
And so I'll just say that people are dying today. The design standards needs to change, and I'm really appreciative of what staff has put together. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Hi, I'm Adam Murphy. I'm the Vice President of the Oak Lawn Committee. I office out of 2828 Route 3 in Dallas. Just wanted to confirm that since PD 193 is the largest PD in the city of Dallas, that that we are not going to be impacted by today's change, since there was a little bit of discrepancy from what I saw.
Another question. Okay. Okay.
So the question was, is PD 193 impacted? And the answer from staff is no.
No, since PD 193 has their own stated ratios within that planned development district, it cannot be amended by this code amendment, at least as far as eliminating minimum parking requirements.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Zara is online. Are you able to unmute yourself, sir?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please
Hello.
begin.
Are you ready?
Yes, we are ready.
My name is Ed Zara, 1003 Valencia, Dallas, 75223. I'm the owner manager of multiple residential and commercial or real estate homes and offices. I joined this discussion in 2021 when a flexible plan to reduce off-street parking was discussed. I am very concerned that this removal of all off-street parking minimums is not realistic for these reasons. When commercial uses are not required to have specific off-street parking minimums, their customers will invade adjacent neighborhoods with increased traffic, noise, trash, and parking congestion. When you have dedicated private parking for your building, you control everything. Without dedicated parking, your investment is at high risk if you can't attract tenants and customers. The most important factor that determines how much parking you need is the competition. All of the data studies mean very little when you compare your building amenities with others. For example, when companies request an RFP for office space needs, they ask for current needs, 4 to 6 spaces per thousand, not a lower number based on hypothetical transportation sources like public transit, bicycles, Uber, Lyft, scooters, walking. Smart developers are designing garages that have high parking ratios for current requests, but have the ability to retrofit the decks into other spaces needs as demand drops without major expense. With an average of 5 months having over 90-degree temperatures, our Texas climate is a deterrent to use any mode of non-air conditioned transportation. Because Dallas has no natural physical boundaries like East-West Coast cities, Texas are car-centric society, like it or not. No other transportation mode offers the convenience and efficiency of a personal vehicle trip. Perception of DART, public transit. Unless DART makes major changes in the service they provide, the ridership will keep dropping even though the population keeps rising in their 13-member cities. Customers are tired of inconvenient routes, undependable service, dirty trains.
Excuse me, Mr. Pizarro, that's your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
We have others.
Well, I have some comments and questions, but if you want to let Mr. Reeds get it first.
Well, we have another speaker here and then.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll try to be quick. My name is Jennifer Hiramoto, 10233 East Northwest Highway, Buzz Urban Planning. I'm a user of the code. I helped developments apply the code. So this is the nature of my feedback. Mr. Navarro was very correct that we need to be able to be predictable in what the requirements are. I think the staff could use a little bit more work on defining the triggers for what the TDMP will be. And what I really want to talk about is the Board of Adjustment for those properties in zoning that will still require parking. I'm excited. The Board of Adjustment has specific criteria that it can issue parking special exceptions. And if the rest of the zoning code removes the minimums, the board needs a mechanism to be able to apply this new policy to consider reductions. So I believe there's one spot in the proposed ordinance that talks about references to the comp plan. I would really encourage more abilities for the board to consider using those comp plans to consider parking reductions. An example is a few years ago, there's a request for a special exception that we filed that referenced the walk score, and the property was a block off of Lower Greenville. The board members didn't know what walk score was. They didn't care. They didn't have any means to take that information into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. May, do we have any other speakers that have signed up or otherwise?
No, not online.
Okay.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wanted to talk?
Thank you, then. I want to recognize we have Commissioner Kingston, the Planning Commissioner for District 14 in the audience. I understand if I call on her that she can speak. So.
Thank you, Chair Housewright. I have a couple of questions. Let me start with, do we really need to have 20 or 24 foot of shared driveway on a 1 to 4 unit? Or is that something that's driven by DFNR?
Do we need to have 20 or 24 foot curb cuts on a 1 to 4 unit?
Why does it have to be that wide for something as small as 1 to 4?
We're not proposing.
I think that was the one he deleted. That was
Right,
mistakenly, wasn't that
Oh,
the
okay.
one that was
I
mistakenly
apologize.
included and it's been struck?
So it's 12 feet for 1 to 4 is the recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That was incongruous and staff corrected that.
And I think I know the answer to this, but I want staff to confirm it. How does this impact historic districts and conservation districts? So for example, the Belmont Addition Conservation District has rear setbacks per street that differ. And it also mandates 20 feet behind a garage. Will a change in 51A impact those type of requirements in our historic and conservation districts?
Historic and conservation districts.
Same thing with the PD, yeah.
Yeah, so the historic and conservation districts take precedent in that situation. So this won't impact any specific regulations that are in those historic and conservation districts.
Okay. Once you eliminate parking minimums, can you add them back if that's something the city wants to do? Or are we are we establishing some sort of right that would give someone rights to call that a taking if we try to implement minimums in certain places? So let's say we try this and we're like, oh, this doesn't work in X conditions. Can city council go back and add parking minimums?
I think should that be directed to cities?
Probably legal.
City attorneys?
Yeah, I can't think of any reason off the top of my head why that would be an issue, but it's something that we can look into.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we want to establish at some point before we send this on the council. Couple of comments. One, we talk about bikes, but we don't talk about other forms of micromobility. I would encourage us to think about that because even though our city is currently kind of hostile to things like scooters, I don't think that's really going to be the future we're going to live with. 2, can we get a copy of the draft TDMP guide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 3, my biggest concern about this is how this impacts some of the special areas that we use parking because it's really the only tool we have to create and maintain a healthy mix. Those areas are like Deep Ellum, Lower Greenville, Lovers and Inwood, maybe even smaller places like Lakewood, Mockingbird and Abrams Shopping Center. If you eliminate all those parking minimums for, let's just say, the retail category, does that incentivize landlords to come back and rent to restaurants and bars because, they make more money that way, especially, depending on the terms of their lease? And does that destabilize the neighborhood? I mean, we certainly saw that in Lower Greenville 15 years ago. And if all of our landlords were John Hetzel, I wouldn't worry about it as much. But I know, working with other landlords on Greenville, that they're not all as thoughtful about the mix and the impact on the community. And so that's something that as you guys look at this, I do want to say that I think that this is a great start and I like a lot of the things that we're talking about. I specifically like the pedestrian safety aspects that are long overdue. And I personally wish we had better mass transit because I would use it. I don't want to have to drive a car everywhere. And I'm sensitive to the idea that Uber is not the solution. But I think that that's really the area that needs the most focus from ZOAC is, are we creating problems by solving one problem and creating others in these higher density, mixed use, commercial residential areas that are stable and successful now? Are we doing something that's going to destabilize these neighborhoods? I have a lot of concern about that. I'm open to reading things or listening to things that if somebody wants to send it to me. I've read, the stuff by Littman and the stuff by, what's the other guy's name? Shoup. Frankly, neither one of them suggests getting rid of parking minimums on a wholesale scale all at once. Austin didn't do that. So I think if we're looking at, how we do this, that's one thing I would ask ZOAC to consider. Thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me speak.
So I'd like to go back to Commissioner Reeves, who had some questions, but I'd like to, and I have some questions as well. I'd like us to focus on what we would like staff to do between now and I believe January 16th with some specific requests of them. That's what they've asked of me. I get the sense that none of us, forgive me for being presumptuous, I don't get the sense that this body is ready to move this on to Plan Commission, but we still have lots of questions. And so I want to prejudice the conversation maybe I have. Mr. Reeves, why don't you go ahead and if we could think about what we're going to ask of staff over the coming 30 days.
Okay, thank you. And it's good to work with you again there, Chair House, right?
Thank you. Likewise.
Yeah, so Commissioner Kingston went over some of the things I was going to go over, so that helped shorten things. But along with the question, reading staff's on staff report on section on page 5, which is the review of peer cities and best land use practices. The last sentence, which is actually on page 6, it says, because much of the shift in policy has been adopted so recently and the timelines of development projects and cultural preference can be prolonged, studies of the impacts of reductions or removal of parking minimums have been few, but generally reflect the city planner's expectations. New developments still provide most, all, or even more than previously required amounts of the off-street parking due to customer, tenant, or residential expectations or development financing requirements. I totally agree with that, both of those statements, actually. One, that we don't know for sure. And then I think we've done a lot of talking about new development going forward and the fact that these larger developments will provide this parking. I remember people complaining about downtown, there wasn't enough parking and people having to add that parking. My concern is that Austin indeed did not do this overnight. They actually took some incremental steps to get to this total elimination of parking. And as Commissioner Kingston said, Littman and Shoup actually suggested that and actually used Austin as a case study to talk about some of these incremental steps. So my question to staff would be, what were these incremental steps that Austin took? What was the time frame for those? And how might they apply here rather than going from 0 to 100 miles an hour in a nanosecond? Might we go to 0 to 33 miles or 0 to 50 or even 0 to 75? I totally agree. We have way too much parking with the developers right now with all the, whether it's commercial, whether it's, big box, whether it's multifamily or whatnot. So this is definitely needed, but we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater here. So like Ms. Kingston said, I do worry about look at all that area around Inwood, and it's and I do agree with, I'm kind of all over the place here. John Hetzel with Madison Partners. I can say as a neighborhood guy off of Greenville, Madison Partners was associated with the devil before John got there. And I worked really well with John down in when I was a commissioner in Deep Ellum, even on Lois Greenville, because they're a large enough property owner, not a massive, like, okay, it's a 10-acre single platted site, but multiple platted sites. They own so many of them, but they're able to mix and match because John knows if it's all bar, like that's what Madison Partners used to do, you go up, and then some bad events happen when it gets out of control, and then it goes down, and then it slowly builds back up. So what Madison Partners has done is even that out by that balanced load of a tattoo shop or a gift shop or a card shop or a little coffee shop that closes at 10 o'clock where someone else is coming in. But the problem with some of these other districts is that, take Inwood, for example, or Fitzhugh or Henderson, or maybe down in Bishop Arts, I'm not exactly sure, is that it could be a bunch of individual landowners. So if I only own 1 or 2 little properties, I want to maximize that investment as much as I can. And that's going to lean me towards a bar, not a shoe repair place. So what are some incremental steps that we might be able to take where we don't jeopardize some of these very sensitive areas that have gone through this before. So if you look at the residential strips, like, Greenville, Henderson, all these, it's a commercial strip that is directly adjacent to residential, where if someone says, I don't need this parking, or I built a truck yard in my front parking space, there's nothing that says they can't do that here. And then that, that easy, accessible, walkable parking is just behind the business. So it's not far. So, my question to staff is, I challenge staff, well, what are some of these things that we can indeed do? The second thing I'd like to ask for staff is, and I talked to Mr. Wade about this a while back, is that can the thoroughfare plan be involved in this some way? Thoroughfare plan is annually or biannually or twice every other year looked at and updated, where it identifies residential streets, residential feeders, commercial strips, obviously highways, DART areas. And if you look at that map, you see everything that's on there. And could we say that if you are on, for example, and I'll use John Hetzel again, if we are at Abrams and Mockingbird, and I know exactly what he's talking about, matter of fact, I went there for dinner last night because I could park and there was plenty of parking spaces. And I went by somebody else that it was busy and they wanted to valet and I just drove right by them. Can we? No, that is what we do want, I think. And when it's that large tract, 5-acre, 10-acre site, and there's one owner, like Madison Partners in this case, they will mix and match. And and it's not easy to go around and start parking in the neighborhood behind them to get to that facility. So, and that's at Abrams and Mockingbird. That is not a residential street. It's not a residential feeder. It's a major street. So could we possibly look at doing this at some of these larger streets that can handle this, that do have seas of parking, and not do the neighborhood, that commercial strip on these residential streets right away? So that would be my request for staff.
Okay. Hey, any other questions, Mr. Reeves?
No, that'll do it.
Okay. And then Ms. Blair, did you have any additional questions?
No. No, no, thank you. But no, I think that if we're going to be directing or asking staff what we need, because I agree with you, I don't think that we're in a position I don't think any of us are ready to say we're ready to forward. Well, let me ask the question, is anyone ready to forward this to CPC?
I'm ready with 3 changes.
I'm ready, except for the fact that I want to make sure that everybody else who has questions and wants more information gets it. So I'd rather wait and make sure that some of the requests made for tables and by Commissioner Kingston, yourself, and.
Well, I have a request of staff. I agree with Ms. Kingston and Mr. Reeves said about going from 0 to 100. If there would be a way that you could bring this back with a like a transitional, so that you don't go from no parking minimums to a minimum that you see is consistent in what we are using now and slightly lower than that, so that he will get you to the transition that you're looking for. So, like we're saying, like right now in multifamily, if we give them some benefits, we'll go from 1 parking space per dwelling unit to half parking space to dwelling unit. So maybe looking at a minimum that says 25% of a parking space per dwelling unit, and look at it as that, or even say 50 per, half a parking space per unit as a standard, opposed to it being a standard when they are having bonuses. So you take your bonus, does that make sense? You take your bonus, or does it make sense what I'm asking?
Generally, the transitional nature of it, yes.
Yeah, so, if our bonus is in multifamily, we go for one parking spot per dwelling unit, that the standard would be a half a parking spot per dwelling unit as the minimum. And if they are asking for any type of bonuses, instead of a half a parking space, they'll either go to 25, a quarter of a parking space per dwelling unit or 0 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which would make that they still get the benefit. It forces your transition to your parking minimums, but it's not a all or nothing today.
I think staff would struggle to come up with some sort of unbiased ratio of, half of what today's is or whatever, because I think the point we're trying to make is that the ratios we have right now are somewhat arbitrary, and yeah, and we don't really have a great rationale for the ones we already have. And so certainly, if ZOAC's recommendation is to have some ratios or some other things, we can draft those for you, but I think that it's taken a long time to come up with what we've presented, and I can't think of any great middle grounds off the top of my head at the moment.
Just so I know kind of where we're going here, do you all need a motion from us on what you're gonna look at, or can we just offer our thoughts?
Not necessarily. It works better for us because, our discussion could take hours, in the meeting to decipher and to figure out what it is if the chair is able to summarize the finer points that we want to focus on.
Okay, then why don't we start with Mr. McGregor and work our way back up the.
On requests or comments?
Offer some comments.
I would like to, if I may.
Conclude with what your request would be, please.
I actually don't have any requests for that.
Okay.
But I do want to explain where I'm coming from, because I do believe that limiting minimums is the right answer. I think that either a transitional piece or something that it would be a mistake. And let me say this, and I don't want to sound pompous about it, but I will be a little pompous. So I've sat through all the 28 ZOAC meetings that we had over the last 5 years. I've read pretty much every significant article and book written on the topic of parking reform and limiting minimums. In fact, I'm quoted in one of them, which is really cool. All the data points to the need to eliminate the minimums. All the urban planners, architects, the majority of developers. In fact, I don't think I've read any article or commentary that has solid transportation engineering or urban planning science behind them that is opposed to eliminating minimums. It is, I want to touch on the part about how it might hurt districts where there's not enough of DART coverage. I do think these are two issues that are managed separately. One is City of Dallas, the other one is a governmental agency, DART. And the fact is, there are also articles, and I wanted to be able to quote the author's name, and that's why I walked up to Mr. Narvaez earlier. I can't remember the author's name, but he has an entire article dedicated to explaining how parking minimums disproportionately hurt disadvantaged communities. And the link is two things. One is they're forced to have cars because of the way our city design and community works. And the second one is that parking minimums, because they result in a lot of waste, also have the effect of increasing the affordability of housing. In principle, what eliminating minimums is doing, it's not eliminating parking. We know for a fact that the code has resulted in a tremendous amount of waste in terms of city design, and staff has gone ad nauseum over examples of how that works. For me, the real just sort of visual thing is I encourage anyone to go to Tom Thumb, Whole Foods, both in Uptown or Sylvan 30, where I live, or pretty much any development of about that size. And this is no fault or criticism of the businesses, but because of the parking code requirements, they have way overbuilt parking. And when I go to Tom Thumb in Uptown, doesn't matter what day of the week, doesn't matter what time of the day, only about a fourth of the parking lot is used. The rest of it is always empty. And when you keep in mind that each one of these spaces costs about $90,000 to build, the waste, the lost opportunity of where there could have been more housing and so forth is tremendous. There may be some disadvantages to eliminating minimums. Yes, some people will take advantage of it and use it as a bar or whatever. The idea here though is that the damage done by having city determine the code is tremendous. What eliminating minimums simply does is it transfers that decision to the local business owner. And the idea is that they have a much better idea of what amount of parking they have. Many examples were given of whether you're close to public transit or across the street from a church parking lot that you can have an arrangement or so forth. But I'm going to land this in a second if I can get back to my train of thought. I think that's it. I mean, I think we are fighting. It's a big change, but it really isn't. We're not going to see the difference ourselves probably in 10 years. That was mentioned already by Mr. Wade. It's just the right answer. Every urban planner, architect, people concerned about it agrees. I'm concerned that anything other than eliminating minimums will give us a bastardized solution that is not going to work. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I went a little long there, but that's it.
That's all right. Yes.
Sure, I'll try and be brief. I suppose if I do have one request, the thought came to mind of asking where we are with parking benefit districts and the framework for that. I do think that could be an effective tool to keep money circulating locally, and so.
And if you tune in at 1 o'clock, actually, a little past 1, Department of Transportation is
Okay.
talking about that right now.
All right, great answer. Okay. And then just a few comments, I think to speak to the resulting architecture and urban design that we get from having a parking minimum code. In our design practice, I mean, we do a lot of infill work, smaller parcels. Every design session starts with, how are we going to fit the parking? And think of the favorite cities you love, right? Think about, why are college campuses playing the way they are? They're not around parking. Why is Disney so beloved? Because it has no parking. I mean, so parking is why our city looks the way it does. It's given us a lot of blight. It's why, again, we sit down as a team, beginning of every project, how are we going to fit the parking? And to bring up the example of the mixed income housing development bonus program, I think I've mentioned this before, but I've been involved in several projects where that required minimum is very low. But what it offers us is an opportunity to actually design the building, to not start with, well, where's parking going to go? It gives us a chance to actually design a building that can address the street and give priority to pedestrians. So 3 smaller multifamily projects I've been a part of, I'll quickly cite, generally in the 30 to 40 unit range, have more or less met the parking requirement. We've got one project that was 40 units that would have required 44 parking spaces, but only 21 were required, again, 40 units. We provided 41 of the otherwise would have been required 44 parking spaces. And these 2 of the 3 projects are in markets and areas of our city that have not seen new development in decades. So these are investments that are happening. Housing units, the 3 projects total 111 housing homes that are being built in part because of the elimination of parking. Or the essential elimination in that program. And we're providing, I'll cite real quickly, the last 2, 39 homes built or underway. 42 parking spaces would have been required. We provided 39 of the required 21. So parking is going to get built. I wanted to, just what I'm trying to get at is the prominence of which required parking is held in the design of our city. We are forced to start with not what the building's gonna be, but how do we fit the parking? And that has resulted in a lot of blight in our city, and when we talk about not having natural amenities like beaches and mountains, well, let's have a beautifully designed city with beautiful buildings, not parking lots. And at the same time, parking very much will be provided. It just should not drive what our city looks like. So that's my soapbox.
Well said. Well said. Mr. Barrett, anything else?
So I'm ready to move this on to City Plan Commission with just a few changes. I've heard all the comments today, and I'm not, there's been a lot of talk from some people, and I saw the comments that talk about public transportation in dark areas and how will people get where they're going? I mean, right now, today, I can go out to the county and build a 100-story skyscraper or a 1 million square foot shopping center and provide zero parking because it's in the county, you can do whatever you want, but nobody would come because there's no parking, right? There's no way to get there. I'm not worried too much about areas that don't have transit access because nobody would build a building that doesn't have parking because there would be no way to get there. I'm also not concerned about spillover parking because we have the folks down in transportation working, or even as we speak, on curb management for the parking meters, the management of the public right of way, which is the original intent of parking requirements, is rightfully held in market management of between the curbs. So let's move that regulation to the right spot, which is controlling the on-street parking and the spillover. And while control of undesirable uses, whether it's the wrong mix of too many of one thing or not enough of another, I hear bars cited a lot for alcoholic beverage uses. While those things are important parts of city regulation, parking requirements are absolutely not worth the cost that comes, the attendant problems that come with it. And overall, there's not really value, since there are not really great justifications for parking requirements in the first place, there's not any value to me in staggering their elimination. So what the changes I would like to see between now and then, and I'm ready to move to City Plan Commission, is to talk about raising the TDMP application to be something like 100 dwelling units, 100 parking spaces. The number is too low right now, in my view. Or if staff has an alternative proposal for a higher number, that is where I would like to end up. And then removing the language about parking between the facade and the street line, I think that's an aesthetic requirement. It creates a lot of site management problems, trying to get cars around the building, behind the building. Some places it's easy, some places it's hard. I don't think this is the proper venue for that kind of discussion. And then third, clarify that a safe, accessible route from both parking and the public side of the building is required. I think that's where you guys were already going. So I just wanted to have that be clarified, that we're talking about getting people safely from the parking lot, from their parking spaces, or from the public sidewalk to the front door, wherever that might be. So with those three things, changed or clarified, I'm ready to move this on to City Plan Commission and get some parking reform implemented.
Thanks.
I'm done.
Okay. I have not asked questions or made comments, but I'll briefly summarize some points and then some things that I think I'm hearing from the commission this afternoon. Yeah, I'm generally in favor of the concept here of eliminating minimums. I agree with all the things that committee member Varian said a moment ago. As a practicing architect, right? First thing to do is that's what hound rule, and we gotta solve the parking. And it's just so frustrating to have to do that. But so I'm definitely in support of this. I have big questions, and I appreciate Mr. Garrett bringing these up. Big questions about the mechanics of the TDMP and just how that's implemented and when it's implemented. I would love to see something more streamlined and easier to understand. I know the staff report tells us that, well, if we don't have to be counting parking spaces and calculating if they provided enough, that we're going to save all this time and it's going to be great. And then I get to the TDMP language and it's subjective and it's complex. And I think we're gonna trade one problem for even a bigger problem. And, you know, clarity and predictability are a virtue in these kinds of ordinances and processes. And one thing that's so frustrating being in the design industry is when there's not clarity and there's not predictability. And frankly, it's those things that place us, the lack of clarity and lack of predictability place us at a competitive disadvantage to many of our suburban competitors, our suburban cities. And so we've got to figure out clarity and predictability when we do this. I think I understood the request about raising the trigger point on a TIA or a TDNP. This 1,000 trips per day sounds a little low to me. I would think, okay, if 6,000 is high, 1,000 is a little low. And can you come back and give us a 2,000 or 2,500 or something? But when you put up the project example on the slide earlier about, well, 1,000 trips a day represents this kind of project and this kind of project, this kind of, that's pretty granular kind of development to be requesting TIAs from, so I'm a little concerned about that. And then I've got a number of details. I'm gonna, with credits for saving trees and other things. I don't want to get lost in that at the moment. But the one thing that did pop up is this topic about the direct pathway from the parking to the building. And conceptually, I like the idea. When it was pointed out that those shall be at curb height, and what that tells me is that every 65 feet in the parking lot, I've got a speed bump that is 15 to 18 feet wide. I'm going up and down, and then it's another 65 feet. I'm going to go up and down, and so then the space between those would be considerably less than 65 feet. Because as I understood it, maybe this is I'll ask this as a question. Are you envisioning that we're going to raise pedestrian pathways that run through the middle of parking lots? Was that
that raised portion of the pathway is just where it crosses a drive aisle, and the 65 feet distance is from any space. So for instance, if you have a column of parking, 65 feet in one direction and or in the other direction needs to be one of these pedestrian pathways. So we're not saying the entire pedestrian pathway needs to be raised. That's just about crossing your drive aisle. And then it's also not meant to be 65% between speed bumps also.
Yeah, I don't think I'm grasping what we're talking about here. So I need some help understanding that. Let's see. So is that, Ms. May?
Right.
Mr. Chair, you never got back around to me as far as request.
I'm sorry, Mr. Reeves. I thought you had taken care of that with your previous remarks.
Well, I did, and if, as long as they got them all.
Yeah, what do you want to?
Okay.
Yeah, you had the show us some transitional concepts.
Right. The city of Austin, what they did, the time frame, and how, and what, even if staff doesn't like it or would suggest it, what might some of the breakout points could Dallas do as an alternative, not to go to 0 to 100. And I must say too, on a comment wise, I'm not disagreeing with I'm 90% on board with almost everything everybody said. So it definitely needs to be changed. So I'm not trying to be the ice pack on all of this. And also the Shoup and Littman's best practices and what they recommend and what the case study that they did with Austin.
Okay.
The thoroughfare plan. Yes, thoroughfare plan. That was it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So, Ms. May, Mr. Wade, are y'all clear on what we're going to work on?
So would you like us to focus on the items that you highlighted or all of the discussion items that were brought up?
Well, no, my intent is all of them.
Oh, okay.
But
So, so I have, maybe look at the threshold of TDMP and maybe, is there a lesser standard to, trigger the TDMP and maybe also what the major and minor, thresholds might be.
Okay.
I see, you'd like more information about the direct pathway, through parking lots and from the sidewalks and the raised nature that, how that might look. And I think maybe we could, list some people in our design studio that can maybe help us, maybe get some more, visuals, to help with that. A little more background on what Austin went through, to get to their pathway. And I know, Wade's talked to them a few times, so you could probably get some insight on that. Let's see, any other major ones that I'm missing?
Streamlining the TDMP. I think Mr. Barrett raised this earlier in our meeting about the complexity of it. Did you?
Enough for
your comments?
Yeah, enough for the raising the threshold and five comes into play and making that tied to both number of units and parking spaces, because we've already done the work. If you're not hitting that certain parking, number of parking spaces, then might be.
And I know that, you know, we probably still have some more discussions with our transportation people about the point value system that's assigned in the TDMP, but I think maybe we can share a draft and just put draft real big on it in the next report.
Yep, that's requested by the commission.
Yes.
This is the manual?
The program guide.
Yeah, and will that have this point system in it?
It will.
Okay, because I'd love to see the point system. Yeah, I just think at this level, at ZOAC, we need to be conversant in these details before we move it upstairs, so to speak. I had one other topic that I failed to mention, and that is why we're eliminating the requirement for off-street loading. I get the whole parking agreement, but I don't understand how that's connected. And if we're expecting, you know, curb management and more perhaps street parking, if we're trying to have a better sidewalk environment, if we're trying to create areas for ride share, drop off, and then at the same time eliminate requirements for off-street loading, those things seem to be in conflict to me. And particularly the language in the draft ordinance about discretion, or what, I forget, I think it was the word discretion that kept getting used. You know, again, no clarity, no certainty, you know, and I can almost see this being abused by someone coming in with a big project saying, you know, it's just not convenient for me to have off-street loading. I don't want to do it. And putting a burden on the street environment and on the neighborhood. And so I'm all on board with exploring how we're going to lower these minimums apparently to zero on our off-street parking. But I don't understand the connection in this conversation to off-street loading. That just seems to run risks to the quality of our commercial districts, our neighborhoods, our sidewalks. So maybe there's some white papers or some evidence of why we need to do that, but that wasn't apparent to me. Okay.
That's it.
Last call, anything?
I guess I just have a question about, maybe it's for you, Chair, but you mentioned kind of, we need to have an understanding in some of these details before we move it up. I mean, I guess I have a lot of trust in my CPC colleagues. Do we, maybe I have too much? No, nothing against you all, but, you know, do we need such a fine grained understanding, or is having the big items, does that satisfy at this level? I don't know if that's an administrative question or.
I was just wanting to see the point system.
Okay.
Gotcha. As a practicing architect, I want to understand the point system and get a sense of how this thing works.
Right.
And knowing that it could change as it goes through the process the rest of the way, but I'm reluctant to send something on if we haven't seen the design manual, if we haven't seen the point system, if
And
we
we
haven't
have
seen
appreciation of what it
the
means.
full span of what the impacts or the implications of this ordinance are.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Any other questions? Mr. Williams, Knight?
Satisfied, do we need to set January 16th as the next date?
Okay. Thank you all for being here. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
We do have our minutes
Oh, we
from
need
our
to approve our
last
minutes.
meeting.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Can we get a motion to approve minutes?
So,
Thank you.
So,
And second, motion a second. All in favor?
I.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. And then now we can take a motion to.
so move.
Thank you.
Second.
In a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned at 1:24 PM.
I can almost see